Few people know that Cardinal Tagle was once a choir boy who struggled with stage fright. His calm and charismatic presence today makes it hard to believe that he once hesitated to speak before a crowd. But what personal experiences transformed him into the confident and empathetic leader he is today? And how did his upbringing shape his connection with the people, making him one of Pope Francis's most trusted figures? Born in 1957 in Manila, Tagle grew up in a modest Filipino-Chinese household where faith was the foundation of daily life. Unlike many who entered priesthood through family legacy, his calling was deeply personal. If you enjoy content that helps you grow spiritually, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and join our community for more inspiration. Let's get started. From a young age, he was drawn to the lives of saints, spending hours reflecting on their sacrifices. His introspective nature and strong sense of empathy set him apart, shaping his approach to spirituality. Despite his natural shyness, he excelled academically, particularly in theology and philosophy. At Ateneo de Manila University, his professors noted his ability to merge important Catholic teachings with contemporary issues. His brilliance earned him a place at the Catholic University of America, where he expanded his theological knowledge and embraced a vision of an inclusive and compassionate church. When Tagle was ordained in 1982, his highly personal lectures made him stand out right away. Rather than focusing solely on doctrine, he told stories of ordinary people, making faith relatable. This unique ability to connect with others turned him into a beloved figure in Filipino Catholicism. His leadership style, rooted in humility, was evident as he traveled to impoverished areas, listening to people's struggles rather than preaching from a distance. In 2001, he was appointed bishop, and by 2011, he became the Archbishop of Manila. His rise reflected his growing influence, but his humility never wavered. He refused luxury, often taking public transport and living simply. His emphasis on social justice and service aligned with Pope Francis's vision of a church that prioritizes the marginalized. Tagle's journey from a quiet boy in Manila to a global Catholic leader is a testament to his unwavering faith. His early life shaped not just his leadership, but also the church's evolving mission, one that focuses on compassion, humility, and real engagement with the people it serves. Tagle's pastoral work in Manila quickly distinguished him from other church leaders. Instead of maintaining the traditional distance of clergy from the people, he immersed himself in their daily struggles. He could be seen walking through impoverished neighborhoods, sitting with families in small, crowded homes, listening intently to their concerns. His approach was simple but radical. Rather than dictating doctrine, he asked questions, encouraged dialogue, and made people feel truly seen. We all face moments when the weight of the world feels unbearable, and finding meaning seems impossible. In those times, a guiding voice and a renewed perspective can make all the difference. This is exactly what The Secret of Jesus' Apparitions offers, a path to clarity and peace through his revelations. This ebook goes into his prophecies and offers insight into what lies ahead. It's available for free in the pinned comment. Grab it now before the edition's gone. During his tenure as Archbishop of Manila, his commitment to the marginalized became the defining trait of his leadership. He actively championed the rights of the poor, advocating for housing initiatives, labor rights, and social reforms that would directly impact those living on the fringes of society. His work wasn't just spiritual, it was also very useful. He understood that faith alone could not solve systemic poverty, but the Church could be a voice for those without one. His emotional intelligence set him apart. Tagle's talks were very personal. Unlike many high-level church officials, who gave polished lectures from the platform. His voice would tremble when speaking about injustice, his eyes welled with tears when recounting the struggles of those he met. This vulnerability made him relatable. People saw in him not just a leader, but someone who carried their burdens as his own. In 2013, after Typhoon Haiyan devastated the Philippines, Tagle emerged as a beacon of hope. Instead of staying within the walls of his cathedral, he went straight to the disaster zones. He embraced survivors, prayed with grieving families, and coordinated relief efforts with international organizations. He spoke not only of God's mercy, but also of the responsibility to act. His presence in the affected communities was not symbolic. It was active and urgent. Beyond crisis response, he extended his advocacy to migrant workers, many of whom were Filipino Catholics scattered across the world. He fought for their rights, condemned exploitative labor practices, and ensured they were spiritually supported despite being away from home. His involvement with Caritas Internationalis, a global Catholic charity, further cemented his role as a champion for the displaced and oppressed. Tagle's growing influence caught the Vatican's attention, particularly Pope Francis, who shared his vision of a church that prioritized compassion over rigidity. Their relationship grew stronger, marking the start of a partnership that would eventually change how the Church spreads the gospel around the world. Pope Francis took notice of Tagle's unwavering dedication to the marginalized, recognizing a shared vision that aligned with his own mission for the Church. Their interactions became more frequent, evolving into a working relationship based on mutual trust. Francis saw in Tagle not only a competent administrator, but a leader who embodied the spirit of a church in action, one that lived among the people rather than above them. In 2015, during the Pope's visit to the Philippines, their bond was on full display. Tagle accompanied him throughout the journey, ensuring that the pontiff was not just a guest of honor, but an active participant in the lives of the Filipino people. When Francis addressed millions in Manila, it was Tagle who stood beside him, translating his message into words that resonated deeply with the crowd. The moment solidified what many had already speculated. Tagle was more than just a respected bishop. He was an emerging figure within the Vatican's inner circle. Their synergy became undeniable when Pope Francis appointed him to key positions within the Church's global structure. In 2019, Tagle was named Prefect of the Congregation for the Evangelization of Peoples, a role historically associated with power and influence over missionary activities worldwide. Often referred to as the Red Pope due to its far-reaching authority, the position placed Tagle in direct oversight of evangelization efforts, particularly in Asia, Africa, and Latin America. These regions were not only home to expanding Catholic populations, but also central to Pope Francis's long-term vision for the Church's future. In times of uncertainty, the right guidance can make all the difference. A special ebook is available now, offering clarity and insight, but only while copies last. Check the first pinned comment before it's gone. His appointment sent a clear message. The Church's leadership was shifting toward a more inclusive, outward-reaching model. While traditionalist factions within the Vatican viewed evangelization as a means of reinforcing doctrinal authority, Francis and Tagle approached it differently. They sought to bring Catholicism to the world through humility, dialogue, and service, rather than rigid dogma. This philosophy, though widely embraced by progressive clergy, was met with resistance from those who feared it was diluting the Church's theological foundation. Tagle's influence extended beyond evangelization. His voice became a guiding force in discussions on interfaith relations, migration, and social justice. His ability to navigate complex geopolitical and cultural landscapes made him indispensable in Vatican diplomacy. Under Pope Francis, the Church's priorities were evolving, and Tagle had positioned himself at the forefront of that transformation, standing as one of the Pope's most trusted allies. With his appointment as prefect of the Congregation for the Evangelization of Peoples, Tagle found himself at the helm of one of the most influential departments in the Vatican. Unlike many of his predecessors, he did not see evangelization as merely expanding Catholic influence. He saw it as a responsibility to adapt the Church to the realities of a changing world. He focused on making Catholicism more accessible in regions where Christianity had historically struggled, ensuring that the faith did not come across as foreign or imposed. He spent significant time engaging with local communities, particularly in Asia and Africa, where Catholicism was growing at an unprecedented rate. Rather than enforcing rigid doctrines, he encouraged a more personalized faith experience, one that embraced local traditions and allowed people to integrate their culture with their spirituality. His philosophy was simple. The Church should not be an institution that dictates, but rather one that listens and understands. This approach was not without controversy. Traditionalists within the Vatican accused him of being too flexible, of compromising Catholic identity in favor of cultural relativity. But Tagle remained steadfast in his vision. He knew that if the Church failed to modernize its outreach, it would risk alienating future generations. He encouraged the use of digital platforms to reach younger audiences, supported educational initiatives in impoverished areas, and emphasized humanitarian aid as an essential part of missionary work. His influence extended beyond evangelization. With Pope Francis advocating for a church that prioritized global social justice, Tagle became an essential voice in Vatican diplomacy. His ability to navigate complex international relations allowed him to mediate discussions between the Holy See and governments that had historically been wary of Catholic influence. He was particularly instrumental in delicate negotiations with China, where millions of Catholics lived under government restrictions. His diplomatic style, shaped by years of engagement with diverse communities, allowed him to advocate for religious freedoms without provoking unnecessary conflict. But because he was becoming more well-known, people were looking more closely at what he did than ever before. Every meeting, speech, and choice was looked at to find out what they really meant. Some saw his rise as a clear indication that Pope Francis was grooming him for an even greater role. Others viewed him as a reformist whose influence could either rejuvenate the Church or lead it into uncharted territory. Either way, one thing was clear. His leadership was shaping the future of Catholicism in ways that few had anticipated. Just as Cardinal Tagle believes in bringing faith closer to the people, you too can access wisdom that nurtures understanding and renewal. Few copies of this valuable ebook are still available. Claim yours in the first pinned comment. Tagle's growing prominence within the Vatican did not come without opposition. His progressive stance, his emphasis on social justice, and his unwavering commitment to making the Church more inclusive placed him at odds with powerful conservative factions. While Pope Francis's papacy had already sparked resistance among traditionalists, Tagle's increasing influence intensified these tensions. Some viewed him as an extension of Francis's reformist agenda, a symbol of a church moving too far from its historical foundations. Criticism came from multiple directions. Within Vatican circles, some accused him of diluting Catholic doctrine in favor of modern sensibilities. His preference for dialogue over dogma, his willingness to engage with non-Catholics on matters of faith, and his advocacy for marginalized communities drew concern from those who saw these actions as departures from the Church's more rigid past. Outside the Vatican, He faced scrutiny from political leaders in countries where Catholicism played a significant role in governance. His vocal support for migrants, his condemnation of corruption, and his push for economic justice made him both admired and controversial. One of the most contentious moments of his career came when he openly addressed the role of wealth and power within the Church. He argued that Catholic leaders should live humbly, rejecting excessive material comforts in favor of serving the people. These comments were seen as direct criticisms of the Vatican's long-standing opulence, sparking debates among those who believed the Church should preserve its grandeur as a symbol of divine authority. Some within the hierarchy viewed his ideals as naive, even disruptive, to the institution's stability. Yet, despite resistance, Tagle remained undeterred. His ability to navigate criticism without engaging in open confrontation became one of his defining traits. When questioned about his positions, he did not respond with defensiveness, but with patience. He believed that reform within the Church would not come through force, but through persistent, compassionate leadership. He understood that change was met with fear, especially in an institution as old and complex as the Catholic Church. Still, opposition to his rise was undeniable. Some factions within the Vatican began positioning alternative figures, men who would steer the Church back toward a more traditional path. His supporters saw him as a beacon of the modern Catholic Church, one that embraced the marginalized, fostered interfaith dialogue, and prioritized humility over hierarchy. His critics, however, feared that his vision risked weakening traditional Catholic structures. The tension between these two perspectives played out not only in Vatican corridors, but also in the global Catholic community, where debates over the Church's direction were intensifying. As Pope Francis continued to reshape the institution, questions about his successor became unavoidable. At 87 years old, the Pope's health and longevity were increasingly discussed behind closed doors. Would the next pontiff continue his progressive reforms, or would the Church experience a return to conservatism? Tagle's name frequently appeared in these conversations, not only because of his ideological alignment with Francis, but also because of his growing reputation as a unifier, someone capable of bridging divides between old and new, tradition and modernity. True change begins with knowledge and the willingness to seek answers. If you're looking for understanding, don't wait. Download your free ebook now, before it runs out. The first pinned comment has everything you need. Within Vatican politics, another figure loomed large: Cardinal Pietro Parolin, the Secretary of State. Unlike Tagle, whose strength lay in pastoral leadership and humanitarian work, Parolin was a seasoned diplomat with strong institutional ties. He represented continuity, a steady hand who could maintain the Church's global influence without pushing for radical change. His strategic position within the Vatican bureaucracy gave him significant leverage, making him a formidable candidate should the time come for a transition of power. If this message makes you think and you feel it connects with you, don't forget to like it, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment. Also, if you really want to support our work and help us keep creating valuable content, consider giving us a super thanks. Join this amazing community and don't miss any news. The contrast between the two was stark. Where Tagle embraced emotional connection, Parolin mastered political maneuvering. Where one saw the Church as a refuge for the poor, the other understood its role as a governing entity with centuries-old traditions. Their differences were not personal, but philosophical, two distinct visions of Catholicism's future. Those within the Church who longed for stability saw Parolin as the safer choice. Those who believed in the continued evolution of Catholic doctrine saw Tagle as a necessary force for change. For now, the speculation remains just that: speculation. Pope Francis continues to lead, and Tagle, ever the servant leader, remains focused on his mission rather than his future. Yet, whether or not he ascends to the papacy, his presence has already left an indelible mark. His rise from the streets of Manila to the halls of the Vatican has reshaped how Catholicism is perceived, not just in the East, but around the world.